Recording, Valleys People, episode 21, duration 30 minutes, recorded 29th of the 11th 81, replay date to be advised.
Hello, welcome again to the Valleys People. Today we're going to meet the director of the Newcastle Regional Art Gallery and also a research scholar from the Hunter Valley who's a world expert on the Aboriginal language. I hope you can join us. Thanks for joining us today. Ever since the Newcastle Regional Art Gallery was opened in 1957, there have only ever been 4 directors. And the 4th director is our special guest today in the Valleys People, David Bradshaw. Welcome.
Thank you. 4
directors and the second biggest art gallery in New South Wales is quite a record, isn't it?
Yes, I think it's good. I think we're very fortunate to have a gallery with such a good reputation and a gallery that can offer such splendid facilities for the people of the Hunter.
Yes. What do you think of it, are its achievements, David?
Well, I think that certainly the previous directors have played a very important part in building on a fairly small nucleus of a collection, about 100 paintings, which were given to the City of Newcastle by Dr. Roland Pope, a Sydney dentist, under the condition that Newcastle would build a library and an art gallery. He also gave a collection of his library to the city as well.
Yes, that was the stimulus, wasn't it? It really got us going. We had to put them somewhere.
And in 1977, of course, we moved from the cultural centre, where we were housed with the library, to the new building on the corner of Derby Street and Lehman Street. And it means now we have really better facilities than some state galleries, some of the smaller state galleries.
Really? And what is it that we are collecting, basically, as a gallery?
Well, we collect, apart from contemporary Japanese ceramics and Australian ceramics, we then collect only Australian works of art, Australian paintings, prints and drawings and sculpture. We try to collect so that we have a chronology of Australian art from about 1830 onwards. We've got a few gaps, and perhaps one day they'll be filled, but...
I guess they're financial gaps as well as artistic
well,
gaps.
these days, some of our major emissions are in fact very expensive to acquire. Perhaps someone will give us 1 or 2 major paintings one day.
Well, we can hope so. Yes. And of course, it's the most significant regional gallery in Australia, isn't it? I was wondering, what did you expect when you came here?
Well, I knew a little more about the gallery. The gallery has got a very good reputation. I think sometimes, surprisingly, a better reputation outside Newcastle than within.
So what's new?
But, of course, I wasn't aware of... I had thought that Newcastle would be rather a dusty, dirty, grimy sort of place. That was my main apprehension of coming here, but I still haven't got over the shock of finding it such an attractive place in parts.
Yes, your background is Victorian.
That's right.
Or should I say you come from Victoria, maybe a better way to put that. Your experience has been with art galleries there.
Yes, I was director of a regional gallery in Victoria, a small regional gallery in Victoria.
Yes. I understand that the financing is different in Victoria to New South Wales. So, like in Victoria, basically, the galleries are supported by the state. Here, it's not really the same story, is
Well,
it?
that's something I'd like to change. I think the council here should be commended on the amount of not only interest that they show in the gallery, both financial and otherwise, but I think that the state government here should really be encouraged to fund not only us, but all New South Wales regional galleries to a much greater extent than they do. As you said, in Victoria, it's the local government, in fact, contributes a minor amount of money to what the state contributes to the regional galleries.
Yes. When you talk about money provided by the Newcastle City Council, you're really talking about ratepayers, aren't you? And I'm just
Well, yes.
wondering, what do you think the ratepayers are getting for their money?
Well, I hope they're getting a lot.
I wonder how much money is involved there. It's a sizable amount, isn't it?
To say, last year our budget, I think, was about 350,000.
And I guess you're going to get people who say, well, we don't mind giving the art gallery $300,000 when all the curbs and guttering is finished. How do you equate all that?
I think people might need curbs and guttering. People need a lot of things in their life. And I think if you just have one thing and wait until that's completed, you miss out on a lot of other things that are important.
Yes, true. Yes. I think the thing we've found in this program is the fact that there's just so much here within the Hunter Valley that's worth recording. And that would be part of the gallery's function, I guess, wouldn't it, to preserve paintings of the Hunter Valley?
Yes, well, I suppose the gallery has three prime functions. And one is to collect, in that sense, it tends to be an art museum, where that once we have bought work, it's our responsibility to look after it, conserve it and preserve it for future generations. The second area, I think, is to show people other sorts of things in the visual arts that may not in fact be in the collection. We do that through temporary exhibitions. Most of the time we would tend to show work that is different to the work you would find in the collection. So there's a balance, so people can actually have a greater balance of all the sorts of things, trends that are going on, not only in the present, but what in fact went on in the past.
Yes.
In the visual arts.
Yes. I'm told you're not a revolutionary, David, but you still have to look forward, don't you, to the advancement of the gallery. What is it that you perceive in it? Or what should we be doing?
Well, my aim, of course, is always to present as a program of events and activities in the gallery that's as good as possible. I think that it's important for people to come in, but the other third element is that I think it's important for us to, through an education program, to explain to people why we consider things are important, or why we think things ought to be shown. I think this is very important, that people then start to get an understanding of the things that they're looking at, as well as just, after all, some people might like A and hate B.
Yes.
I think you can hate something but still appreciate its worth.
Yes,
I mean, that happens in life, doesn't it?
You weren't attached to the gallery early, but I seem to remember all the letters to the editor and the newspapers and radio of the day full of art critics. It seemed that Newcastle didn't have an art gallery for so long that as soon as it did have one, everyone wanted to put a point of view forward. And some of the early contemporary selections or decisions within the gallery to purchase came in for quite a lot of criticism. I guess you've caught up with all that.
Yes, it's interesting. Our next show, which opens next week, is the last 2 years of acquisitions, which is one of the things that interests me in the fact that the ratepayers then have an opportunity of seeing how their money is spent. Curiously enough, since I've been here for the last two and a half years, they seem to be the least attended exhibitions. So it seems to me that people mustn't be all that concerned about their dollar as a ratepayer.
Well, that's a good thing. I guess a lot of people would be fascinated by the role of a director, because I think we can understand that you've got administration to concern yourself with, and you've got advancement of the gallery to concern yourself with. I just wonder how that works. I mean, you know that you have a particular budget, and I guess you know your fixed costs, so that gives you a kitty left over. And is that now some money and you and looking at the world to see what you can buy on our behalf? I mean, how do you control that?
Well, you strike a budget, for example, I suppose, with the City Council first of all, and the Aldermen approve of that. And then I guess you try and get the best value for money that you can possibly get within that amount of money that's been allocated for example, acquisitions, or the amount of money that's been allocated for exhibitions. You try, I think, and get the best that you can for that available money. You would look to all sorts of places to try and get work and keep your ear to the ground a bit. I mean, we're just recently negotiating for 2 Australian paintings that have turned up in Dublin. And fortunately for us, they're slightly cheaper than they would have been in the normal Australian market. I think that's it's perhaps unlikely to continue, but it's sometimes luck like that.
Yes, yes. The acquisition budget, I guess, is stretched and will never be satisfactory to any director because you'd like to acquire as much as you possibly can. But I'm just wondering, are you satisfied with the rate of acquisition of the gallery over the years, given the amount of money that it's had?
I think that it's done very well, and I once again think the previous directors have bought very wisely and very well, and I think that although sometimes some of them have been criticised as being wasting money on buying work that's been considered to be, at the time, fairly controversial, it's now, in fact, I suppose, considered by some to be fairly conventional. So when fashions change, it tends to, in fact, people are slow to catch up in a sense.
Yes. But a gallery receiving criticism is not unique to Newcastle, is it? I mean, you
Oh,
have
no,
blue
heavens
poles
no.
in the National Gallery, and plenty of examples of the would-be critics suggesting that there's no value in particular purchases.
Oh, it's nice to know that people are stimulated by art one way or another.
Yes. Is it, you know, as a personal thing, David, is it disappointing to you that, say, more ratepayers don't attend the gallery? It's like, I guess it's a mixture of tourists and ratepayers.
Yes, it is. It's hard to determine exactly how many ratepayers as opposed to visitors or people from the Hunter Valley do come. However, the City Council, when it used to, of course, be called the Newcastle City Art Gallery, when the new building was opened, it was changed to a Region Art Gallery. I think it was very far-sighted of the aldermen to agree that they were prepared, in a sense, to fund the entire Hunter Valley,
Yes.
as far as the visual arts were concerned, by providing a facility that no one else in the area could possibly provide now or catch up with.
Yes, well, being our fourth director and being here sufficiently to form opinions, I guess, long enough to form opinions, and also coming from an area outside the valley, I'm just wondering how you rate the Hunter Valley artist, past and present.
Well, everybody has their ups and downs, and the Hunter Valley has produced some really very important and very famous painters, and also controversial, like Bill Dobell, I suppose.
Yes.
But John Mulvig and John Olsen, who recently completed a mural in the new City Hall, are all very well established and well-known figures in the Australian art world, and undoubtedly in the history of Australian art. And I think that you will find from time to time there tend to be waves of people who really become famous and
Yes.
important.
Yes. Well, of course, it's not that every region has its own art gallery, and the Newcastle one is something I think to be proud of, right within the Hunter Valley. And we can only look forward to continued guidance under your direction.
Thank you
David
very
Bradshaw,
much.
thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks, Ron.
I'll be back in just a moment with our next guest. Welcome back to the Valley's people. Our second guest is a research scholar at the University of Newcastle. His studies have taken him to Cambridge and London in the search for the true tongue and the culture of the Australian Aborigine, and in particular the Aborigine of the Hunter region, the Awabakal, if that's as close as I can possibly get. But Percy Haslam is the expert, and Percy Haslam will no doubt correct me, because I'm accustomed to saying Awaba, and it's very hard to say Awabakal.
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 Yes, it comes from the verb awataliko. It means to straighten out and smooth out. The lake was called Awaba, sacred bird. So that is the basis for the pronunciation.
And it was that tribe that went extensively throughout the Hunter Valley?
No, it was Newcastle, Lake Macquarie, coalfields, part of Port Stephens, Central Coast, to the coalfields. It was the first cousin to the lower Hunter tribe, the Wanneroo.
Right, right. Now, you are the world expert on the Awabakal language. Now, this was the language that was spoken here. So in dealing with a language, you're dealing with the culture, aren't you? Even though we're going back, say, what, 40,000 years or more?
Oh, yes. Actually, it may be well said that this region is the birthplaces of Australian anthropology. The first mission was established at Belmont by Threlkeld, the missionary, in 1825, and his book in 1827 was the first ever Aboriginal language ever translated in Australia. I brought that back with me from London.
So it was born here, the studies were born in the Hunter Valley?
Yes, and his record as a scholar and a linguist is now being more and more widely recognised, and thus also this region, this rich in history Hunter region, is also being given that recognition both here and overseas.
Well, I guess you're repeating the cycle too, aren't you? Because your work is now becoming recognised throughout the world. This has been a lifetime of work, hasn't it? Since you retired from the Newcastle Herald, you've been doing little else.
That's right. Well, I was seconded from the Herald by arrangement with the Convocation of the University to become its first visiting scholar. I owe to the Herald the opportunity over the years as a journalist to meet Aborigines, to record their history, write about them. To the University, much of this work is a tribute to its cooperation, particularly to the staff of the English department, who have been most warm and sympathetic with their encouragement.
And where did you get this curiosity to begin this study, Percy?
When I was young, my grandpeople were often visitors to Lake Macquarie. They had property there almost a century ago. When I was quite young, through them, I was introduced to the last pockets of the old people who were hiding probably from the intentions of the then government to put them on reserves. For some years I made regular visits to the mountains and around the lake, and I learnt the language. I learnt so many things, then all of a sudden they disappeared. No doubt the police were on their tail.
Of course, it's very difficult for me in talking to you, because to comprehend the significance of the work that you've done, because you are in effect a link, aren't you? I mean, you are the person that in fact has retained the original language and in fact is teaching the original language back to the Aboriginal descendant.
This is a debt, I think, that any white person should owe the people, particularly to this region. After all, the language was sustained in parts of Lake Macquarie through the Europeans in the last part of the last century. Quite an interesting history. Now, the Aboriginal people here, through the Aboriginal Awabakal Cooperative, to whom I also owe a great debt for the opportunities they've provided in meeting with the people of the culture, and there are still people of the culture. There's still a determined move to get back to the culture, and I think there's nothing better than to examine our program, which was initiated by John Heath, dedicated young man to this thing, and to Kevin Anderson, the president of the co-op. They're trying to take their people through the present generation back to the culture in terms of language, in terms of spirit belief, and in getting them restored the dignity that was so much a part of the character of the tribal Aboriginal.
Have you been able to form your own scenario of that sort of Aboriginal living well before the white man in the Hunter Valley? I mean, what was life like here?
It was very peaceful, very secure. You can imagine in a rich place like the Hunter Valley, Port Stephens, Lake Macquarie, Newcastle, an abundance of food. Only the other day I was reading some stuff I brought back from England by an officer who was here in 1827, and he spoke of kangaroo hunting, and then all of a sudden he spoke of the kangaroos, the emus majestically wading through the swamps 2 miles south of Newcastle, the site of the present sports ground.
Yes, yes.
So there's food in abundance. They had their own rich rituals, their strict moral disciplines, their magnificent legendary and mythology, and a tribal discipline and morality, I fear, that we couldn't match in modern times. And these people instinctively still have much of that at heart, and they're still very much determined as part of their land rights claim to return to Mother Earth, to become again part of the tribal system which enabled them to survive for some 40,000 years or so. No taxes, no pollution.
No, no. And the Hunter Valley Aboriginal tribe was different to the tribes of, should say, the Northern Territory or Western Australia.
These are the pure Australoids, Ron. These people were very handsome. Their women were physically attractive. We have more than one record of the Newcastle, Hunter Valley and the Port Stephens people having men 7 feet high.
Really?
And even on the north coast, the Numbar people were also very tall. So what we are trying to do is to give something in the terms of atonement to cancel the debt we owe to the first Australians, to recapture some of the valid history, record it, give it to them, and let them take it on from there.
Well, what happened in the valley basically? Was it the white man's gun or the white man's disease, or just the Aborigine wanted to go further afield?
Disease and the penal presence. And this is a terrible story because nowhere where there was a penal presence did the Aborigines in Australia have a hope of surviving and their culture being able to continue. The convicts.
Well, Tasmania attests to that, doesn't it? Yes.
Sure, and after all, we was the first penal settlement. Imagine it. And the Hunter Valley, Newcastle, and Port Stephens, and I think we should call it the Hunter region rather than Hunter Valley, because they all have affinities and similarities. They all suffered the same problems, the same disadvantages to the ordinary people, that is the penal presence, the rich squatter, and as a result, and disease. And disease is a terrible thing because we have to think it in the terms of the Aboriginal physique, not ours. A cold, measles, could exterminate a clan or a horde, or a large part of it.
Yes, especially with the younger children mixing with the white child who had measles or something. They had no resistance to that at all.
Down at the place near Wyong, a young child had measles, wasn't very advanced, and she mixed with a little horde, a group of Awabakal of some 27 or 28 people. Within a fortnight, only 3 or 4 people were still living. All had died from measles. Mm. This is because of the purity of their bloodlines.
You mentioned a name there like Wyong just a moment, Percy. That's Aboriginal, is it? Wyong?
Wyong means yam, and that was the southern boundary of the Awabakal.
And Waiyi then?
Fire.
What about the lake? I think there are Aboriginal names in, well, Awaba we would call it.
Awaba.
Yes.
Awaba.
Yes.
Actually, the name of the tribal area was Nikinbar, the place of coal. And our Lake Macquarie Aborigines were using coal for thousands of years, and we have since learned.
Really? And Pulba, is that Aboriginal?
Pulba, it's a sacred name.
Really? It's a sacred island?
It's a sacred island because Ngorowong is the noun for island, and Pulba, like Awaba, are more or less ritual names.
Oh, you're going for ages because you've got Kurumbong and Katara and many Aboriginal names.
That's right.
Yes. Well,
right,
at least that's been retained.
Yeah, Nalkabar, Keenbar around the coalfields. And it's good that they have survived because they tell us something about the ancient history of the past.
Yes. Well, I'm going to repeat myself, Percy, because lest somebody just thinks that's watching this program at the moment that we're just doing an interview because you are interested in Aborigines. But I just wanted to clarify that it goes far, far deeper than that. The work that you are doing is such that your own studies have enabled a new generation of Aborigines to learn their ancient language, which in fact had been lost by their parents, their mother and father, and so on. So you're in fact restoring a culture and restoring a language.
Returning something to them we took.
Well, that's your word. You're certainly putting it there, Percy. And
yes.
I think, I don't know how you measure this. I mean, it's not just the Aboriginal person, it's not just society, it's the world that should be focusing on your work. And I can't think of anything to say, so I'm going to do a tribute in our own way. If you look over here to your right, you have a group of Aboriginal children who are about to sing you a song. If it hadn't been for your work, there wouldn't be one word in this song that these children would know. This is the original Awabakal language, which has died out for generations and now revived for us through these children and through the work of Percy Haslam.
Ima ya kano
And so the work of you, Percy Haslam, means that the Awabakal language lives on through Percy Haslam.
Thanks, Ron.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our guest today, David Bradshaw, the director of the Newcastle Regional Art Gallery, and also Percy Haslam, whose work amongst the Aboriginal culture and language is now well recognised. I hope too that you have a chance of joining us in our next program when we meet two more of the Valley's people. Goodbye for now.